What's your favorite Star Wars movie?
Attack of the Clones, of course.
No, really. What is it?
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and what if I told you that Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, was actually one of the greatest Star Wars movies ever made, and it's the saga entry that's the closest to Shakespeare.
You serious?
Hear me out. For one thing, this movie did so much world building, and it has some of the most important character moments in the entire saga. Without this second installment of the prequel trilogy, our understanding of the tragedy of Darth Vader just would not be the same. Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, is known as the film that shows Anakin's fall to the dark side, but I'd argue that it was actually Attack of the Clones that showed us Anakin's actual turn. Well, I'm going to explain why this movie is so important for the saga and why it's like so deeply, richly layered with all this context and visual metaphors that, frankly, a lot of people just wouldn't notice. Attack of the Clones gave us our first glimpse at the forbidden love and thanatophobia that would lead to Anakin's downfall. Thanatophobia? Yes, a fear of death and an unwillingness to accept death. Anakin's final step in his fall to the dark side was his inability to accept that the woman he was forbidden to love might actually die. In Attack of the Clones, right from the start, we see Chancellor Palpatine pulling the strings and playing both sides of the chessboard. With the failed assassination of now Senator Amidala, Palpatine uses this attempt on her life to bring Anakin and Padme together. This was Palpatine's first step to driving a wedge between Anakin and the Jedi Order, as well as a wedge between Anakin and his master and father figure, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
And you will learn your place, young one.
Palpatine knew that if he was going to shape Anakin into the hate-filled dark side warrior he had foreseen standing by his side in his takeover of the galaxy, he would need Anakin to break from the Jedi Code. And so he needed something or someone that he feared to lose.
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Now, here in a sec, we're going to dive really deep into the most criticized portion of the film, the love story of Anakin and Padme. But first, I want to talk about how this movie was really the first time we saw any real interaction between Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Pull up, Anakin. Pull up!
In The Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan and Anakin didn't really share any meaningful time or dialogue until Qui-Gon's funeral. And keep in mind that prior to Qui-Gon's death, Obi-Wan was very critical of Anakin, going so far as to call him a useless life form.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
He also questioned Qui-Gon's persistence to train Anakin and appeared to side with the Council in their initial rejection of the boy.
The boy is dangerous. They all sense it. Why can't you?
The opening of Revenge of the Sith gave us some great moments between the two before they were trying to kill each other on a lava planet. And the Clone Wars series, of course, gave us a lot of great moments between this Jedi duo. But Attack of the Clones was really the first time we got to see this friendship between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader that we had heard so much about in the original trilogy.
He was the best star pilot in the galaxy, and a cunning warrior, and he was a good friend.
And look, I'll be the first to tell you, the dialogue in this elevator scene is pretty clunky.
Clunky.
But it does its job in showing the complexities of Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship. Not only are they master and apprentice, not only do they share a brotherly bond, but there's also something paternal between the two. A little later in the film, we see Obi-Wan scold Anakin like a child, but in the elevator, we get to see a side of their relationship that's like far less formal.
You're sweating. Relax. Take a deep breath.
And later we get this fun nod to Anakin and Obi-Wan's final meeting in the flesh. And it's Anakin's follow-up line that begins to show the parallels between this film and The Empire Strikes Back.
Why do I get the feeling you're going to be the death of me?
Don't say that, Master. You're the closest thing I have to a father.
Then why don't you listen to me?
I am trying.
That line perfectly parallels Vader's big reveal to Luke in Empire.
I am your father.
Now that iconic scene between Luke and Vader solidified the Star Wars saga's overall theme of fathers and sons. The mirroring of that iconic Vader line depicts the parallels of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy.
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
The Phantom Menace paralleled A New Hope, with Luke and Anakin, father and son, both being orphaned young men on desert planets destined for a greater purpose. And both boys left their homes with Obi-Wan to learn the ways of the Force and to take the first steps to becoming a great Jedi. Revenge of the Sith and Return of the Jedi parallel Anakin's fall to the dark side with Luke's rejection of Palpatine, as well as Anakin's return to the light. But what Attack of the Clones parallels is The Empire Strikes Back's theme of family, destiny, and the beginning of the end. Now look, I could go on for hours about the many parallels between Attack of the Clones and The Empire Strikes Back. You got the badassness of a little green Jedi on full display, Luke and Anakin's severed hands, the introduction of the Mandalorian bounty hunters, Jango and Boba respectively, but I want to focus on one similarity in particular, forbidden love.
Oh yeah, you're talking about when Luke kisses his sister.
No, not that level of forbidden. I was thinking more of in the vein of Han and Leia.
You think a princess and a guy like me?
No.
Now, Leia was royalty and a leader in the Rebel Alliance, while Han Solo, the outlaw, came from a more rugged corner of the galaxy. Now, while the relationship between Leia and Han certainly turned some heads, Padme and Anakin's forbidden romance dialed it up to 11. Not only did they come from very different backgrounds, Padme coming from royalty and Anakin being a slave, but their future roles as a senator and a Jedi Knight made things even more complicated. And it's not just the forbidden love of Anakin and Padme that resembles the tale of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. It's the very way the film is portrayed, from the dialogue to the scenery to the way the film is shot. Many of the scenes on Naboo showcasing Anakin and Padme falling in love feel like they're ripped right from a stage play.
My heart is beating, hoping that that kiss will not become a scar.
There's also the parallel between Romeo and Juliet's secret wedding and Anakin and Padme's secret wedding at the end of the film. Also, I want to say how much I love that 3PO and R2 were at the wedding, but they kept their secret. Very sweet. Now, there's also a lot of biblical imagery in this film. Here, we see Anakin and Padme in a beautiful field that I think was meant to resemble the Garden of Eden. And Anakin and Padme, of course, are Adam and Eve. Both characters are fortunate enough to be living their dream. Anakin being lifted from a life of poverty and slavery to now becoming a Jedi Knight, and Padme climbing the ladder in her political career after serving her time as queen. Both of them are fulfilling their dreams. Living in this dreamlike state is like they're inside their own metaphorical Gardens of Eden. But both know that in order to live those dreams, there is one no-no that they must respect. They cannot have each other. So this mirrors Adam and Eve's time in the garden. They were promised an everlasting and blissful existence in exchange for obedience. Adam and Eve's one rule was that they weren't allowed to eat the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge, just like Anakin and Padme were not allowed to eat the forbidden fruit of, well, each other.
I'm sorry, what did you say? They weren't allowed to eat each other?
Yeah, I messed up the metaphor, sorry. My point is the forbidden fruit in the Bible was basically meant to represent lust, like a forbidden lust. The same forbidden lust that we see between Anakin and Padme. And we also even get imagery of that metaphor here with Anakin and Padme sharing this piece of fruit. Anakin says,
If Master Obi-Wan caught me doing this, he'd be very grumpy.
Now here, Obi-Wan is meant to represent the fact that the Jedi Order would not condone Anakin and Padme's romance. In fact, Obi-Wan becomes the personification of the Jedi Order throughout the film, with Anakin's constant mentioning of Obi-Wan being overbearing and holding him back.
He's overly critical. He never listens. He doesn't understand. It's not fair.
Now, the fruit from the Tree of Knowledge is also meant to represent maturity. Both Padme and Anakin have come a long way since their first meeting in The Phantom Menace, and now they find themselves yearning to pave their own path in life. Padme is questioning her role in this galactic democracy, and Anakin leaves behind the dogma of the Jedi Order.
What do you mean by leaving behind the dogma?
Well, in the conversation with Padme on the transport ship, he basically kind of retcons all the Jedi tenets. He twists the Jedi dogma from, oh, we're supposed to protect people, to it's okay to love and have attachments to people.
Attachment is forbidden. Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life. And so you might say that we are encouraged to love.
Now, sticking with the Adam and Eve themes, Palpatine is, of course, the serpent of the story, the devil.
Palpatine represents the devil. He represents the pure evil.
But crucially, in that Garden of Eden scene with Anakin and Padme, they have this conversation about politics, where we get to hear, that famous meme of Anakin really starting to sound like he's into fascism.
Sounds an awful lot like a dictatorship to me.
Well, if it works.
And what we're hearing there is actually Palpatine's influence on Anakin, his way of thinking. Palpatine spent years getting close to him, whispering things in his ear, making Anakin think that, yeah, a really strong leader like himself could make the galaxy work again. Palpatine is meant to represent the devil who tempted Eve with the forbidden fruit. He is the orchestrator of Anakin and Padme being in the situation they're in. If not for Dooku's attempt on Padme's life and the creation of a clone army that Obi-Wan went to investigate, Anakin and Padme would have never shared this time alone. Palpatine even suggested Anakin as a bodyguard.
Senator Amidala will not refuse an executive order. I never well enough to assure you of that.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Palpatine also took on a devilish type role when he bolstered Anakin's feelings of deserving more.
I see you becoming the greatest of all Jedi, Anakin.
Orchestrating Anakin and Padme's time together was Palpatine's way of tempting his eventual apprentice with lust that would be his downfall. A lust that would only make Anakin have disdain for the Jedi that forbade him from being with the one he loved. But it was also a lust that would become an attachment that Anakin could not live without, and that he would do anything to keep.
Just help me save Padme's life. I can't live without her.
And then we get this great silhouette between the two where Anakin's Jedi bun creates a shadow that looks like the helmet of Darth Vader. Now this silhouette isn't just a cool Easter egg. It confirms that Anakin's path to becoming Vader has begun, and there is no turning back.
No turning back? You're saying at this point that it was too late for Anakin to change?
Well, not this exact scene, but the one that followed, when Anakin had nightmares about his mother being in pain. Nightmares which, by the way, could have been placed there by Palpatine himself. I mean, hell, I wouldn't be surprised if we learned that Palpatine organized his mother getting abducted in the first place. In fact, there was a deleted scene where it's revealed that it was Dooku who organized the Tusken abduction of Shmi Skywalker, of course, acting on orders from Palpatine. When Anakin returns to Tatooine and learns that his mother had been captured by Tusken raiders, this is when we see him cross the point of no return. Upon the death of his mother, we see Anakin reach a level of hate that can never be undone. It's this scene on Tatooine that to me is the point of no return for Anakin Skywalker. Now look, I know that there's an entire TV series that takes place between this movie and Revenge of the Sith, and there's a lot of moments in that series that show Anakin being a stand-up guy. But there's also a lot of moments that show Anakin being really brutal and cutthroat. So I still believe that this was the moment that Anakin embarked on an irreversible path to becoming Darth Vader. It's in this scene where Anakin reveals that he has fallen victim to everything Palpatine put into play. It's at this moment that Anakin reveals his new lust to become the most powerful Jedi ever.
I will be the most powerful Jedi ever.
This all sets up perfectly Anakin's tragic fall from grace that we see take place in Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin is once again met with visions of a dying loved one, his beloved Padme. If not for Attack of the Clones showcasing Anakin and Padme falling in love and the death of his mother, Revenge of the Sith just wouldn't work. Anakin's forbidden love for Padme was one of the first wedges driven between Anakin and the Jedi Order, and Attack of the Clones parallels that forbidden love with the death of his mother, a mother Anakin was taken from by the Jedi, making it to where Anakin now connects his grief for his mother and his love for Padme, and he connects the dots every time back to the Jedi Order, and he blames the Order for everything that's gone wrong for him. He blames them for the death of his mother. He blames them for not being able to be with the woman he loves. He blames them for not being the Jedi he should be. And this is all laying the groundwork for Anakin's eventual betrayal and slaughtering of the Jedi, which was foreshadowed by his slaughtering of the Sand People. Anakin slaughtered the Sand People in response to the death of his mother, and he slaughtered the Jedi in response to his refusal to let Padme suffer that same fate. And speaking of the Jedi Order's ultimate demise, Attack of the Clones also gave us our first real look at the hubris of the prequel-era Jedi Order. Not only does it showcase Palpatine's brilliant manipulation of the entire Jedi Order and his deception of their Christ figure in Anakin Skywalker, but we also get to see this era of the Jedi get a reality check. For centuries, these Jedi were not challenged by the Sith or any other threat capable of taking them on. But Attack of the Clones showed us that the Jedi are not invincible, and dispelled with the very myth that even a young Anakin Skywalker believed.
No one can kill a Jedi.
We saw Obi-Wan and Jango Fett's fight end in a draw. Hundreds of Jedi get mowed down by a droid army, and two of the Order's best swordsmen get bested by a former Jedi Master. The Phantom Menace showed Jedi cutting through droids like a hot knife through blue milk, and Obi-Wan winning against a formidable opponent in Darth Maul. But Attack of the Clones didn't really give the Jedi a single win, except for when Mace Windu decapitates Jango Fett. Now look, Attack of the Clones' most vocal haters will even acknowledge that one of the coolest things in this movie is that we finally got to see an army of Jedi like we heard about in the original trilogy.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic.
But to me, it wasn't seeing the Jedi in their prime that was cool. It was seeing them get defeated so easily by an army of droids, and how easily they were manipulated by the devil himself. The Jedi's defeat in Attack of the Clones was also another parallel to The Empire Strikes Back, where our heroes suffer a major blow with the capture of Han Solo and Luke's failure to defeat Darth Vader.
Wow, person, you made some really good points there.
Thanks, man, and I get why a lot of people overlook these themes. A lot of what Lucas did in these movies is told through visual language, which is a good thing because his literal language kind of sucks.
I killed them. I killed them all. They're dead.
Hey, wait, what do you mean by visual language?
Well, this is a movie where every shot is crafted to tell a specific emotional story. For instance, look at the very first shot of the film. After the title crawl, the camera pans up, breaking with the tradition of the previous 4 Star Wars movies. This creates a sense of inversion, like the status quo of the galaxy is about to be flipped on its head with the beginning of the Clone Wars and the rise of Palpatine. Or, you know how we talked about Anakin killing the Tuscans as the moment he fell to the dark side? In the moments leading up to that, we get this incredible shot of Anakin on a speeder, eclipsed by the setting sun. Much like his Vader shadow, this is foreshadowing how the darkness within him is taking control. And in the moments before the Tusken attack, he is high above them, near the stars. The camp is below, surrounded by flames. Then he jumps downward, and the obvious metaphor here is that Anakin is descending into hell. The visual of encroaching darkness is also used on Coruscant in Yoda's meditation chamber. First, when they realize the dark side is clouding their ability to use the Force, and then later when Yoda senses Anakin's potential fall to the dark side.
Young Skywalker is in pain.
And this visual is reused in Revenge of the Sith, when Yoda's final, terrible advice to Anakin basically drives him into the arms of Palpatine.
Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
But Attack of the Clones also has a core theme of duality. Anakin and Obi-Wan pursue an assassin who takes 2 forms, one human and one monstrous, representing the 2 paths these heroes will take. Their journeys will take them to 2 very different environments, while they each begin in established, civilized places. In fact, their seated, over-the-shoulder conversations with Padme and Dex are actually back-to-back in the film. Then they each journey to harsher climates that are the polar opposites of one another, symbolizing how this story is forcing them to drift apart. And these journeys also lay the groundwork for the Clone Wars. In 2 very different settings, we see how the opposing armies are created. The Republic Army is in a very clean, corporate space. The white walls of Kamino are also reminiscent of George Lucas's first film, THX 1138. In THX, the society that's controlled by machines is pristine, it's white, it's sanitized. In fact, the endless prison THX is sent to is simply a large white void. Lucas often uses white as a symbol of control and uniformity and lack of emotion.
I'm so depressed I don't know what I'm doing.
Whereas the other army is created in the droid factory, which is gritty, ugly, and dangerous. The sequence is filled with handheld shots and crash zooms, while all the shots in Kamino are smooth and controlled, almost like the camera is floating. The arena battle is a clear homage to John Carter of Mars, one of the earliest Star Wars influences. And I also loved how in this final reel of the movie, Lucas really embraced all these pulp inspirations for Star Wars. The title of the movie, Attack of the Clones, sounded pretty campy. But I'm really glad that the movie doesn't have some self-serious title like The Encroaching Darkness or something like that. Also, the staging of the final battle hides some clever foreshadowing. Ordinarily, in movie battles, the hero army charges from left to right, and this feels natural because that's the direction we read in Western literature. But in Attack of the Clones, and often in the Clone Wars series, the clones are charging from right to left, hinting that they are really the secret bad guys of this story. And you have to admit, the final minutes of this movie are like peak Star Wars. The sunset of the Republic, Palpatine watching the march to war, the first time we hear the Imperial March in this saga, chronologically. Followed by that forbidden wedding and the amazing John Williams theme, Across the Stars. I think Across the Stars is the last truly great Star Wars theme, at least until The Mandalorian. And finally, there are lots of other incredible things about this movie that I loved. The Art Deco design of Padme's ship in the opening shot, the sonic charge, the fact that Jar Jar Binks causes the fall of democracy.
Misa propose that the Senate give immediately emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor.
That is honestly hilarious and by far the funniest thing Jar Jar does in any movie.
Oh, Jar Jar. Everyone hates you but me.
There's also the statues of the 12 Lost Jedi in the Jedi Library. Now these are Jedi that left the Order, but the Jedi kept their statues to remind them of their failures. It's that kind of layered in the background backstory that the sequel trilogy just never bothered to show us. The movie also introduces a techno union. The costumes are outstanding. Yoda gets a John Wayne entrance. The design of Dooku's ship is so cool. And there's also the fact the Death Star was hiding in plain sight for an entire scene and you never noticed. Or maybe it did notice, I don't really know you. Not that the movie's perfect, there's still some really bad dialogue.
I don't like sand.
Shmi's hilarious death. Obi-Wan talking to himself.
There's an unusual concentration of Federation ships over there.
Padme landing on the monster. the diner, the sports bar, and frankly, Dooku should have either been in the first movie or Mace Windu should have turned evil in this one instead of Dooku, so the trilogy would have had a consistent bad guy across all three films. Those are nitpicks. They're armchair quarterbacking. This movie is something rare in blockbuster filmmaking. It is an auteur being given free rein to tell a personal, political story that is also layered with subtext. It's not perfect, but it is pretty great. Well guys, I want to shout out the writer of this video, Mr. Colton Ogburn. You can find his socials and mine below. What did you think of Attack of the Clones? Is it underrated? Is it overrated? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.